Hey, stepmamas, welcome to the Stepmom Unfiltered podcast. This is your go to space for unapologetic, unfiltered conversations about the roller coaster ride of stepmotherhood. We're your hosts. I'm Adrienne.
And I'm Amelia. We understand that being a stepmom is like walking a tightrope in stilettos. So we're here to help you embrace the messiness, laugh through the craziness, and find strength in our shared experiences.
This podcast is more than just a series of episodes, it's a community for stepmoms to be real, raw, and unfiltered. Buckle up because we're about to embark on a journey of candid conversations, taboo topics, and expert insights.
This is the Stepmom Unfiltered podcast, your sanctuary for real talk and real solutions.
Hey, back for another episode of the Stepmom Unfiltered podcast. How are you, Amelia?
I'm good. I'm warm.
That's changed. You're not
Yeah.
normally warm.
No, it's a much needed and change around here.
I love that.
Mhm.
For those of our listeners who don't know, Amelia lives in Canada and I live in Southern California. And so we're always talking about the weather because it is drastically different in our worlds. So for me,
Yeah.
it was 90 degrees by 8 o'clock this morning.
Yeah, I think so I'm in southwestern Ontario. So for us, it's gonna hit, I think it's 40 this afternoon with the Humidex. So I mean, if you are Ontarian, fellow Ontarian, you'll know probably when we were recording this because it is a heat wave. But I'm trying to soak it all in because otherwise I'm usually frozen.
Yeah,
Um,
we kind of laugh because you guys are Celsius, we're Fahrenheit.
yeah,
So for those that don't know the conversion, 40 is about 80,
I don't
80,
even know what
low
the
80s.
conversion is.
Well, your high is 88 today. Our high is like 110. So for
Okay, yeah,
context. So
yeah.
yeah.
Ours is with the humidity though too, so I think that's another difference, right? The dry
Well,
heat versus the humidity.
we do primarily get dry heat, but I'd say August, September timeframe, we get really humid. So, and
Humid,
it's gotten a
yeah,
lot more humid than it used to be. We blame it on the golf courses and all the
right.
water.
Oh, the water, yeah.
So
Yeah.
awesome.
Anyways, so enough about the weather. I'm nice and warm. That makes me happy. I like to be happy.
Yeah. So I know we wanted to talk about the hardest part of being a stepmom, and what that is for each of us. We find that through our conversations and conversations with clients, that the hardest part is different for everyone. And what people find as the easiest part is different. So I think it's always interesting to see what others have struggled with and what others have found solutions for.
Mhm. Yeah, everyone is vastly different. I think because every experience is so different, from custody schedules to the relationship with the ex to maybe how you grew up and what was, you know, shown to you through your experiences. So I think, everybody's experience is different because of those things, which, um, yeah, for me, I don't know. I was trying to think through when we were talking about this, what is like the hardest?
I think for me, it was always not having complete control of how our children were
Mm,
parented. And I don't mean control in as in like I needed to control everything, but having to accept and be okay with
yeah,
parenting being different in the other homes, especially when it was things I didn't agree with or things that I felt maybe were, I would say, detrimental to the kids. And
right.
and having to I think that goes hand in hand with having to know and just trust that the other parents equally love the kids and they're not
Right.
looking to do anything wrong or damaging. um
Mhm.
it's hard to trust when there's a reason you're not in a relationship with that person any longer, or you didn't choose to have to parent with their new spouse. um
Right.
so I think for me
Yeah.
that was the hardest. That was the thing I had to learn, to step back, take a breath, and accept it for what it is. And that's it. It is what it is. And I have to just
Mhm.
make the best of it. Um, I think everything else I could accept: parenting more kids, co parenting with my spouse, navigating extracurricular activities and school functions, and like all of that.
Right.
That part was easy.
Yeah.
the co-parenting with the other homes and accepting different parenting styles for me was the most challenging, or has been the most challenging.
Yeah, and I would say a lot for you or anyone dealing with that would be maybe removing the ego from the situation, right? Because like our
Mhm.
ego wants us to be right, like our way is the right way.
Right.
You know, at least I know for me and my way of thinking, that's what I've had to remind myself of
Yep.
is like maybe that isn't the way I would do something, but maybe my way isn't necessarily the right way either. It's just a different way than the way the ex is doing it.
That,
Um,
and I think it's not about right or wrong all the time. I think we always
yeah.
put right or wrong to it, but I think it's just
Mhm.
I had to learn to realize it's different.
It's different.
It's
Yeah.
their way isn't wrong and my way isn't right. It's just
Mhm.
different ways of doing the things.
Right. And so then that boils down to different values as well, right? Like where,
Absolutely.
you know, I think we've talked about this before, but like maybe education is high up on your value system, but maybe it's, a couple tiers lower on the X's, right? And they
Right.
value something else
Right.
instead. And so again, doesn't make anyone right or wrong. It just makes people different, and therefore their parenting looks different
Right.
from home to home.
Yeah.
Yeah, so creating that or learning to have that understanding
Mhm.
mhm, of
Yeah,
the
and I think
differences, which isn't easy.
yeah, it was all of our conversations about ego that opened my eyes to that, and I think it was also realizing that I put myself in the mindset of if these were friends and they just parented
Yeah,
different, I wouldn't be so judgmental, and I would just
you wouldn't
accept
have
it. I would just say
right.
like, "Oh, they just have a different parenting style. Oh, that's just how they choose to raise their kids." And then when
Yeah,
I stepped back and said, "Well, why can't I do that with the exes?" That's when my aha moment was like, "Oh, okay, if I can quiet my ego and just
yeah,
accept it as I would anyone else that I'm friends with,
mhm.
why should I treat it any different?" That was kind of
Well, and
a
I
pivotal moment for me.
I think what happens though is, you do start to have that judgment, and then your anxious mind takes you on an adventure, right? Well, if they
Oh,
don't get good grades in high school, they don't get into the university program that they want to, they don't get a job to be able to sustain themselves outside of the home that I'm providing, they're going to live with me forever. Oh my God, what are we going to do? Like, I've
that
literally went through that before and realized and had to dial it back in and say,
mhm.
okay, literally all of that is a made up story.
Yep. Well, and I
Right?
think that coupled with the history, right? Let's face
Yeah,
it, there's history with these individuals. They aren't just
right,
friends. You don't typically always get along. You're not seeing eye to eye. There's other history that you're filtering all of this through, and that it does
right.
complicate things. It's not
It does.
easy. Um,
Yeah.
and I think
Eh,
if you can separate that and compartmentalize it, and if you can just I had to literally say, okay, if this history didn't exist, how would I respond?
Yeah,
And make the conscious choice to respond that way. Because I do
right.
think a lot of it does boil down to choice. But that comes with
Totally.
your own self healing and awareness and wanting to do things differently, wanting to see it differently, wanting to improve things, or just not be so harsh of a critic.
Right. Yeah. And I think it's important too for stepmoms or bio moms in a step family, whatever the situation is, who's listening here. Um, okay, so I think it's not also realizing that it's not about getting to a place where you're always just an expert at this. Like it's a
Mm.
continuous journey. Like one that I know I'm still on, if I'm being completely honest. Like I have to check myself all the time and be like, am I right? Or do I just want to be right? Or is it possible that her way is just a different way, like you're saying, and it's equally as right as mine? I don't think there's ever like a destination that we're gonna get to. It's
Yeah.
more just the openness to continue to work through the ebbs and flows of step parenting. That's just
Yeah.
the reality of our situation, of a step family situation, right?
Yeah, I think that's so true. It's a journey and there isn't a
Mhm.
destination. There isn't an end of the road that you're trying to get to. It's just what's next. And because the reality is this doesn't end when the kids are 18. And I know we've said it, many people say it. I just have to get the kids to 18. Once they're 18, what? Then they have college and college graduations and some point probably marriage and babies and other life milestones that they deserve to continue to be celebrated. And you probably plan to still have a relationship with your children. And guess what? So do the other parents. And so at some
Yeah.
point you have to figure out what that will look like and how it will be navigated. And of course, that's different for everyone. It doesn't mean you have to do things joint or be together and
No, of course
but you
not.
have to recognize that at 18, that kid doesn't just become yours. It's you still have those dynamics and those other individuals for that
Of
child,
course.
that person. They still have the other side of their family. Um,
Well,
so
yeah, like I keep thinking ahead as the girls are getting older. It's
Mhm.
like I'm not, I don't want them to have babies anytime soon, but I do keep thinking about like what happens when there's grandbabies,
Right,
and then you've got the soccer games and the dance recitals and, all the things that the grandbabies will do. And those are things that I
right.
know my husband and I have talked about. Like we plan to be very involved in our grandkids if that time ever comes for us.
Mhm.
So then there's that to navigate. So yeah, it doesn't end when they're 18. Like you're still going to be navigating these tricky situations, right? So it's really all about the long game and learning these
Yeah.
coping skills as a stepmom to be able to ride the waves,
Mhm.
for as long as you're doing this, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So yeah. So I think if I had to sum it up, the co-parenting side was probably the hardest, but not actually co-parenting with the ex or the other parents, more my mindset around
Mhm.
how they parent and
Yeah.
how to accept that. So
Yeah. It's an
yeah.
ongoing.
I know, I
Uh,
know.
yeah, I don't know. I don't even know that I can narrow it down to one um for myself, but I know one that really sticks out to me is just the inability to have the relationship that I expected to have with my stepdaughter.
Mm,
And it just hasn't worked out that way, the way that I anticipated, the way that, yeah, I had dreamed of. It just isn't that.
yeah.
And I think that's been really challenging for me on a lot of different levels.
Hmm.
Um, and I think the reason I went in with that expectation was because I know the relationship I have with my stepdad.
Hmm.
Um, right. And I know how we interacted as I grew up. And
Right.
so again, I just kind of assumed that that's how it would be, not considering all the factors that play into how relationships develop or don't develop and
Mhm.
so on and so forth, right? So
Do you
yeah,
think
I
Do you think because you're also a bio mom and you have a strong relationship with your biological daughter, that that also plays into some of the assumptions you went into it with? And because they're close in age, right? So it's kind of that
yeah.
mindset of like, oh, I'm already a mom. Oh, they're close in age. Oh, I know how to do
Mhm.
this. Oh, this will be great. We'll have these relationships. Do you think that equally plays into it? Or do you think it was more because you were a stepchild and the relationship you got to experience with your stepdad, or kind of a combination of both?
I think probably a combination. Yeah. And again, I was a stepmom before I came into this relationship, so I
True.
already had two stepkids
Hmm.
before that, um, who, my previous stepdaughter, I don't know how you're supposed to word that.
A former
Um,
stepdaughter.
my former stepdaughter, yeah, I mean, we had a pretty decent relationship and that continued. And yeah, so it really had me often questioning like myself as a human being, like why can I not connect with this child? Why can't she connect with me? And in those earlier years when that connection wasn't happening, it was really like, what's wrong with me? Like, why
Mm,
is this not working? Right.
yeah.
Um, and because I did have, my daughter and, you know, I just adore her and we have a wonderful relationship and we always have. Yeah, so it's like what's going on here? And as the years went by and as I learned more and all the things, realizing all these different factors that played into why our relationship is the way that it is, and
Mhm.
just learning to accept it has been a challenge, but also a little bit freeing because I'm no longer trying to make it something that it's not going to be, right?
Mm.
Like it truly is what it is.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, it's good
And
that
that,
you've come to that place to accept that.
mhm,
And who knows? I mean, the thing is we don't know what it will be in the future. And I know you, so I know you've continued to pour into her regardless of whether the relationship's where you want it to be or not. And
right.
so who knows where that will lead in the future. It's complicated. Relationships are
It
hard.
is. It
All relationships
is.
are hard. And I think we have to
Yeah.
recognize that.
Yeah.
So
No, that is the truth.
in contrast, I'm curious, what has been the easiest part for you of being a stepmom or having a blended family?
The easiest part for me, I guess not me specifically, but for us as a whole, was the blending part, I think.
Mm,
Like our girls
mm.
just got a lot, like almost from the minute they met. It was like, and I don't know if it was because they are only 4 months apart
Mhm,
or what.
mhm.
But they just always got, I mean, they had a few tiffs when they were 3 and 4.
Well,
There was a
that's normal.
few,
That's
you
siblings.
know, throwing of toys happening and yelling at one another. But honestly, for the most part, like they still are, like they're almost 16 now and they talk every day and, carry on,
Mhm.
as girls
Yeah.
do, which is great. And I've worked with many people and spoken to many people that like that's just not the case,
Yeah.
like their bio kids and their step kids just do not blend. And so I feel like we really lucked out in that
Mhm.
regard.
It's
Yeah.
funny, it's the same for me. The blending part came so easy and so
Yeah.
naturally, and I think for me, it was more my husband and I were so on the same page from day one and
Mhm.
had our values aligned, and how we saw co-parenting within our home came so easy and naturally, and
Right.
then our kids actually, so for those that don't know, we were neighbors, that's how we met, and our kids wanted to play before we were even talking or knew each other. They saw that there were
Mhm.
kids next door and they were like, "Oh my gosh, we want to play." So yeah, there were play dates happening before we were even a thing. And so when we got married, they were over the moon excited that, "Oh my gosh, now we're sisters." Um, and so
Wow.
that part was so easy. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. I know. I feel like
Yeah.
we both lucked out there because I can't even imagine trying to parent kids that were not getting
Oh
along, that had
no.
to live in the same home, that
There's
yeah,
enough
I
other challenges and external challenges and other complications
mhm,
that would probably have been my undoing, to be honest. And like you, I have 2 of ours are 6 months apart in age, so
right.
they're both 17 right now, so they're look, don't get me wrong, they're also still siblings living under the same
Oh, of
roof, and,
course. Yeah.
there's other things they have their moments of,
Yeah.
bickering or,
Mhm.
not liking one another
Not
for 5
liking.
minutes or whatever it is, or having their
Yeah.
World War III blowups that come with but that also comes with the ages, and this is, like, part of normal family stuff anyway.
That's what I was just gonna say.
So
So many times we hear stepmoms saying, giving an example of like something that they find challenging. And I'm
mhm.
like, wait a minute, hang on here. That like let's not blame it on the step family. That's just like a family issue. Like
Yeah,
that's being a parent, that's having multiple children in one home. Like that's nothing to
right,
do with step families, right? And I
right.
think sometimes um we forget about that
Mhm.
we just want to blame everything on, well, it's because it's a step family. And it's like actually it's that's not always the case.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Well, I know we would love to hear from our listeners. What's your biggest challenge in your step or blended family, and what comes easy for you equally? Because if we can build a community around sharing experiences and helping others
Mhm.
learn, then that's the best path forward. So
Absolutely.
reach out, connect with us on Instagram at the Art of Blended Chaos, or connect with us on our website, theartofblendedchaos.com. Share your story, share your questions, just connect with us. We'd be happy to hear from you.
Awesome.
A quick disclaimer to cover our asses. The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed on today's episode are the speaker's own, so if you didn't like them, why didn't you turn us off sooner?
The material and information presented here is for general information purposes only. If you need support with a specific topic, you can do so by booking a one-on-one coaching call through our website, theartofblendedchaos.com. This podcast is not intended to replace professional legal or medical advice. You seriously didn't think we were lawyers or doctors, did you?